Introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
1, 2, a skidda-didda-doo.
Minor Wisdom.
This week I have Jason Barrera on. I know that I should probably roll an R or two, and I apologize, but I can't. It's just one of those things I cannot do. So Jason Barrera, by the recommendation of Rachel Gomez. So Rachel recommended his name. I had never met Jason. I still, technically haven't met him. Virtually I've met him, and we saw each other, and we know what each other look like, but I haven't been in his presence at any convention or festival or UIL One Act Play or anything like that. And so it was really great to meet him because I had no idea who he was. And I don't mean that to be rude. I just, we don't know everybody. And that's part of why I love doing this podcast, because I personally, and I've mentioned this numerous times, that I selfishly kind of do this podcast to get to know people, expand my own personal network. Why not? So I really thoroughly enjoyed getting to know him. And what's funny, and I won't disclose too much information, but when I stopped recording, we kept talking for a little bit, and we agree on something that I've made very public on this podcast in the past, and I won't keep harping on it because I don't want things to necessarily be negative for him as well. So, but I really enjoyed getting to know him. He's a very, very well-spoken individual with a lot of strong opinion when it comes to theater and high school theater and educational theater. And so I just really enjoyed it. The other reason I probably enjoyed it so much was, no offense to Jason, but if I had interviewed anyone that particular day, I would have probably thoroughly enjoyed it, because it was a horrible day for me. I don't know if anybody else is struggling through this sort of face-to-face / online work. And I don't know if it's necessarily my school, my district, the state, whatever it might be, but it's a mess. It's an absolute mess, and I'm not going to get too deep into it because I want to keep my job, and I don't know who listens to this. But if you want to hear, the personal complaints, then by all means reach out to me on Twitter at Mr. Blake Minor, or you can talk to me on Facebook or something. But this was a horrible week. This was a horrible, horrible week with students moving from class to class, students going from face-to-face to online, not being told that there were coronavirus cases in my school, which is not an administrative thing. That's just how the protocol is of my district. And there were just all kinds of issues that I was fired up about, especially when I interviewed Jason, and I didn't let that get in the way. And I had a great conversation with him, and it helped me get happy again. And then I woke up the next morning, and all that washed away because of the current situation we're in, and it just sucks. And my glass is empty, and I have nothing to offer to the students, which is really, really horrible. And maybe this is a cry for help for somebody to reach out and just say, hey, it's okay, we're all in this together. I feel like I've heard that somewhere before, but it's true. I'm very, very done. And I know that there are a lot of other theater teachers that feel the same way, because just the lack of quality education happening right now isn't because the students or because of the teachers, and really it's not even the administrators. It's stuff we can't control. It's almost nobody's fault, but there are things that have happened to me and to other people that I know could have been sort of avoided if planning had been done just a little better within the state of Texas, and it wasn't. So that's my soapbox. I don't want to taint Jason's episode, his pod, but I do want you to reach out to me if you have anything that you would like to say. I'm not going to air your grievances, but I would love to just kind of, I don't curse very much on here, but I'd love to shoot the shit with you about the current state that we're in, because I know a lot of us have our opinions and want to get this fixed as quick as possible. And some of us are doing things to help get this fixed. So Please enjoy this interview with Mr. Jason Barrera.
Think I'll start by saying that I had a wonderful high school theater experience just from the day one when I started high school. Like so many other people, my theater directors really inspired me to not only be the best that I could on stage, but to grow as a person. And they really became that second set of parents, that so many kids need. And so I think that a lot of my theater experience and everything that I love about theater and what I'm doing now really comes back to them. And so, that's just the first and probably the most important thing, especially amongst us theater educators, to recognize that everything that everyone's doing in this state and in the country and in the world really with theater education is so important because it helps to create other educators like us. So shout out to my theater directors at McAllen Memorial High School. After high school, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to go study out of state. I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York, and at the time, that was not anywhere on my radar. Um, I grew up in a very poor family, a single mother, and for many years, it just kind of seemed like my route was the military and other ways in which I could find financial means to maybe go to school, but to ultimately just to like live a better life, right? And so it seemed really far fetched to me for a poor kid from the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas to go and study theater and to eventually make a living. And I understand why people are skeptical of doing that. But I don't know. Is something just really turned me into this path. I mean, I was moments away from signing to go into officer training programs before my senior year of high school, which would basically commit me to like at least the reserves in the military. And something at that moment just said no, like theater is still an option. And even though I didn't come from a lot of money, I decided to apply everywhere. I had a lot of reason to believe. I had a lot of confidence in myself at the time. I really wanted to go into directing. Obviously, we're at that age, we're all kind of actors, and we want to be actors as well. But I really wanted to learn everything I could about theater, and I felt like people were giving me enough reason to believe that I would be a talented director. So I started applying to every good school out there, and I knew that it would come down to money. And I got into a handful of them, and this small liberal arts school in upstate New York gave me enough money to put me in a position where I was able to go study and be with some really great performers from across the country. And from there, I got to spend a semester at the National Theater Institute at the O'Neill Theater Center in Waterford, Connecticut. Work with a bunch of professionals there, and I just had a really wonderful experience. And came out of it with this really big breadth of knowledge and experience. There were moments in my college experience where I was putting together these kind of underground shows in little studios, and I was trying to work with a lighting designer, and instead of like turning over all of the responsibilities and duties to this other person, I'm really in the room with them, and I'm asking all these questions, and it's like, how do I what does this do? What does this circuit do? What is this number here? What is the name of this outlet? What is the name of this? And it's a lot of learning by doing. And by the time I graduated, I really felt like because of that breadth of knowledge, I take no hesitation in saying that I'm a jack of all trades. I kind of hate the adage that paints that in a negative light. Us theater educators, we are jacks and jills of all trades, right? And so I decided that I wanted to go into education and ultimately give back to other people in my community what my theater directors gave to me. And I was very fortunate to land a middle school position in the same town that I grew up in. So I came back down to the Rio Grande Valley, and I taught a year of middle school, and that was a blast. And it just so happened that right after that year, there was an opening in one of our high schools, and many of these districts, many of these schools, these openings don't happen, but once a decade, if that. And so I threw my name in the hat, and they decided to trust me. And I was young at the time, and the program was in need of some repair and some growth, and I was the only director at that time. And like many programs in the state, you're working with a smaller budget, you're working with a lower stipend, and I just put all those things down on a goal list, right? And said, the point of me doing this and the point of me being here is to develop and do something that is bigger than me. It's going to last longer than I am in this position. So, I wanted to increase that stipend so that we could attract other high quality staff in the future. I wanted to increase that budget, which is now like more than quadrupled. Wanted to see and make sure that the facilities get renovated, which finally happened last year, and ultimately provide student success and opportunities for students to thrive. And that's something that I'm very proud that we've been able to do from day one. So I've been teaching theater for this is my 10th year now, and 9 years in high school. And it's my life, and it's what I love. I tell my students that every show we do, what really, really motivates me is challenging myself to do something I've never done before. And I mean, students are first and foremost in this process, but it's also important as educators and directors in theater who do this kind of, have the cyclical nature of a show and then another show and then another show and then another show over and over and over again, to always have something that's either fun or a passion project or this or that. What really motivates me is taking on a challenge that I haven't taken on before, doing something I've never done before. So, for example, like, in this particular play, I've never built a false ceiling, and I really want to learn how to, instead of just put up flats going, vertically, like a horizontal false ceiling. Like, how does that happen? How do you light that? How do you build a grid of ceiling tiles like you would find in a classroom on stage? I didn't know the answers to that, but starting a show and not knowing the answers is so thrilling and exciting. And I love sitting down in a room and telling students that I don't have the answer to this, but we will figure it out. And I think that's the process in which we learn the most. And the other thing that's really drawn me to theater, and I teach this to my students, is the moment. And by the moment, I mean, we all in a show, in a story, there's this kind of this like cathartic or crisis moment in which the protagonist usually is kind of at their like height of despair or triumph, and it's a pivotal moment in that character's life. And otherwise we wouldn't be watching a story about it. There wouldn't be a play written about this particular moment. We don't like watching everyday boring life on stage. We share the stories that kind of pivot us into a different trajectory of life, and identifying those moments not only on stage to make it memorable for the audience, but also getting students to identify what those moments are in their lives. Because in the same way that characters work to overcome obstacles in order to achieve objectives, I think our job as educators in the theater world is to provide context for students to identify what obstacles are currently in the way of them overcoming their objectives. And the more that we can help students achieve their super objective, I mean, that's just that's life right there. And I think that doing those things and sharing the process with students and providing this opportunity for the community to come in and enjoy and learn. I mean, I think we've got it made, man. Theater is just so fun, and I
Yeah.
love it so much.
Yeah, no, you said a lot there, and as I explained, and here's my creaky chair. But as I explained to every guest, I organically get questions based on what you have to say, and I've probably filled this my little. I'd sit here and I type. I look like I'm looking at you. I'm not. I'm typing out questions of things I want to ask,
Right.
and so I think I have more questions for you than anybody, only because, or especially
Cool.
not only because, but especially towards the end there when you were talking about the challenges, because I am very similar in that regard as well. I'm one that doesn't like repeating shows. I know there are directors that like to do. They have cycles
Right.
of seasons and stuff, and
No. Yeah. I have yet to repeat a show.
yeah. So one thing we did a couple years ago, we did Sweeney Todd, and that wasn't the plan to do that show that year, and so I knew the challenge that year was the
Right.
chair, right? The famous how do we do this? Because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to purchase it, I didn't want to buy it or rent it. And
Yeah.
so that was one of the things. And I was very honest with a couple of kids that helped me out. That we're going to learn how to do this together, and it's the same thing. So I do have what show did you do a false ceiling for? You spoke as though you're a professional now, so you gotta tell me what show that was.
Right. Well, so that last year was our fall play. It was
Okay,
called The Language Archive by Julia Cho.
okay,
And it takes place in this kind of archive office setting. And something about that setting, it's the only central location.
right,
There's a stage left and a stage right that alternated, but we needed this central location to look like an office. And because left and right rotated, you have to go minimalistic.
sure,
I wanted to go really detailed in the center location that's going to be there throughout the whole play. And so in order to amp up the detail of that central location, we decided there would be a floor and a false platform, or have your wooden floors and a
yeah,
big bookshelf. And then we hung ceiling tiles and a ceiling grid, from the battens, and put in those little fake fluorescent lights
yeah.
as well. And if you're not looking on the left and the right side, you would think that you're in a totally different
Wow.
place. And man, that was really fun.
What did you make any mistakes that you had to go back and troubleshoot? Or I mean, what type of tips would you give? I know right now we're not building ceilings in our spaces. We're not, most of us aren't doing shows, but like, is there some? This is a selfish question because now I just want to know if I ever do this, I call Jason.
Right.
So
Yeah. um, I think that hanging a ceiling grid to lay in tiles is all about levels.
yeah,
And by levels, I mean like having an actual level on hand,
right,
because you're hanging these grids from battens using this like, strong wire that is malleable but still strong enough to hold it up.
sure,
And the other thing I did, the very first thing I did, was I popped out the ceiling tiles in my classroom, got on a
to
ladder,
see what,
and just
yeah,
looked around and figured out, the kind of logistics and infrastructure within that real ceiling, and then replicated it on stage.
right,
But it's really hard to make sure that the grid is entirely the same height from the
right,
ground. Because you're essentially just tying little knots out of this wire. So making sure that you've got a level on hand so that you don't accidentally start shifting a little
right,
bit down, and then all of a sudden the tiles don't fit in there. And yeah, it was a little bit of a pain. I would also suggest, if you're going to do the ceiling, maybe consider not doing a false floor as well, because then you putting the ladder on top of a
sure,
platform in order to work. Maybe stick with the floor by itself. I think that's something I would have done if I could do this show over again.
okay,
Is just use the real stage floor if you're going to create a ceiling.
right. That's funny. Or do that last, or yeah, knock out the
Right.
floor. Yeah, do the
Right.
floor at the end. Is there a challenge
Yeah.
that you've faced that has defeated you?
Oh man.
While you
I
think,
think it would be,
I was going to say, while you think, I can give you an
sorry.
example.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I mean, like I had the
Yeah,
head, I
no,
had
yeah,
the head,
give me an example.
I had the head of Oz. We wanted to create a moving head, a talking head, and it was
Hmm.
like a physical, massive, floor to ceiling talking head, and it defeated us. We couldn't get it done in the time that we had, and the way that we did it. Literally came crashing down on us when we tried to move it. So that was a challenge that I eventually just threw my hands up and said, "We don't have time. We've got to move on to a solution that'll
Sure.
work for the show." So, what's something that
Sure.
you might have?
Yeah. Well, I think that, this is a tricky question because within the process, we adapt and we change our plans. And so sometimes adapting our plans is settling, and in essence that challenge defeated you. But at the same time, modifying your plans to more attainable goals is totally legitimate and necessary, because as creatives, we start with like the almost impossible still on the table. And so I don't think that quite constitutes. So I'm having a hard time
Yeah.
deciding, what kind of defeat. There was one moment though in which I started preparing for my defeat. Um, 2 years ago, we were doing Newsies,
Okay.
and my challenge was to build platforms using steel pipe instead of wooden legs.
Right.
And I've learned about bolting legs and supporting them and this and that. And if it's X height, you're going to use 4x4s instead of 2x4s, and this and that. And I had all this stock 4x4s and 2 bys and platforms already made and whatnot. But instead of trying to make those wooden legs look industrial in the kind of the scaffolding look that we wanted, um, I really wanted to challenge ourselves to use steel pipe. So Schedule 40, really thick stuff, and making platforms we had some 6, some 8, and one 10-foot platform that was just entirely, the legs were entirely steel pipe. I had never done that. And people who have done it know how attainable and realistic and strong and supportive it is. So, I'm sure there are people out there who are like, yeah, that's the way to go. What else are you doing? And then I'm sure there are other people who are like, I would never do that. That is so scary and probably really expensive. But it turned out to be almost as attainable as working with wooden legs if you don't already know that. The process of learning that is similar. But there was a moment when I was preparing to put up the 10-foot platform with steel legs, and I could see it kind of move a little bit. And and on one hand I was like, well, maybe this should just not be 10 foot tall. Maybe that's too much. And then at the same time, I remember walking out of rehearsal that day and stopping myself. And I turned around and I started counting my stock of 4x4 wooden legs. And I was counting that stock so that I could resort to using that if the pipe didn't work out.
Yeah.
And I've never told my students that.
Yeah.
I've never told my students that. And I regret doing that because that's doubt,
Yeah.
and until something literally cannot happen, there's no room for that in our creative process.
Right. That's funny. Well, maybe. What you said this was last year or 2 years ago?
Yeah, too.
So you still have some students that are at that school that would have been affected by that, yeah?
Yep,
That's funny. So
definitely.
I want to go back to kind of the beginning of what you were talking about. Do your high school teachers know how much you appreciate them?
Oh, that's a good question. I hope they do. I really, really hope that they do. I've had some opportunities to share with them, and to share my story with other people. Um, I know that they know what they did for me.
Yeah.
I know that they know that they were a formative part of my not just upbringing, but creation as an educator and
Yeah.
as an artist. Um, I think what's difficult is that we're in the same district, and so like I'm now competing with them when it comes to competition
Yeah.
stuff, and that's not just about UIL. That's not just about like competitive shows, but sometimes we're competing for reviews, we're competing for praise, we're
Yeah.
competing for students, um, and and it's unfortunate that that's an aspect of it, um, but at the same time I think that's a double-edged sword
Yeah.
that can be used to motivate people, um, and I think sometimes it motivates them, and it has motivated me in the past. And I think that like everything else in life, you kind of like go through a learning phase and adjusting, and eventually reach this this point of wisdom in
Yeah.
which you can kind of settle in and embrace the situation. And I feel like we're starting to kind of embrace the situation, and ultimately create a better district-wide program that's going to benefit all of our students.
Sure. What was the moment that you think you got bit by the bug? Do you remember that moment?
The moment I got bit by the bug. Oh, okay. I'll give you two,
Okay. Okay.
because they're
Two
very different
bugs.
ones. The first time I realized that theater was my thing, I was a seventh grader, and my theater arts teacher told me that I should go see this play, their one act play. Um, and I was a football player at that time, so after football practice, I went over to the theater at the high school, and I sat by myself in the back. I hadn't showered, so I knew I was smelly, and I sat very far away and didn't want anyone to know I was there. And it was a wonderful production of The Diviners. Like, it's one of those productions where you really wish you could go back and see, because you're not sure if it was your seventh grade self not knowing any better, or if that was like a once in a lifetime production. Because I think it was the latter.
Yeah.
I mean, the students who were in that show, they were eighth graders, right? It was a middle school production, but they went on to do really well in high school, and many of them studied theater afterwards, and it brought me to tears. It really moved me, and I think that was the moment where I was like, that's me. This is what I want to do. This is where I need to be. Now, the moment I decided that I wanted to direct theater and really be a part of theater, like kind of as my life and as my career, comes back to my high school directors, who embraced us having a student directed play festival. And we started that kind of with my first year of high school. And so it was in its inaugural infancy stage my freshman year. And I remember the theater director saying, like, well, I don't want to say no to you applying to be a director,
Right.
but also you're a freshman, so we'll see, right? I don't think they had enough people. And so by default, I think I was kind of accepted. And we turned it into a little competition to mimic the one act play contest, and we won. And but it wasn't about that. It was about sitting down and watching the performance, right? And this is something that every theater director out there understands. You watching that performance, especially on opening night. And so a teenager doing that is so powerful and has so much potential to allow them to see, what this is like. And that's something that I haven't been able to replicate in my teaching in my high school department. So even more just kudos and shout outs to my high school directors for doing that,
Do you
and
think
as much
that's
as you can, if
Do you think that's though a change of the times? Like, you're not an old guy. We're probably very similar age, but Do you think that because I have a similar experience as that, but do you think that's because, not to knock you down, that's the kids. That's just, the where we are now. It's not that the kids are worse. It's just that the kids are different and they're more instant gratification. And do you think that has anything to do with that?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely
Yeah.
possible. There's no denying that students are different, that we are always a product of our circumstances and our environment, and the circumstances in which we live in now versus 10 years or 20 years ago, 30 years. I mean, you can go further back, and every generation is totally different. And I think my generation was really on the tail end of that, really really kind of giving people the opportunity and letting them run with it. And yeah, unfortunately, I do think that we're in an age in which, you tell a student to go direct a show and they don't have access to facilities because they can't offer their one facility to five groups.
Right.
Kids are going to throw their hands up in the air like, well, if I can't rehearse here, where can I rehearse? Like, we rehearsed in people's
Yeah.
driveways. We rehearsed at my church when we had to. We we literally stole couches out of friends' living rooms to be set pieces for the day of the show. And it is kind of hard to imagine students doing that today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know it might have been like a no duh kind of question, but I mean, it becomes more of a onus on the teacher to try to replicate what their education was, but we can't replicate it. We can only try to adapt and, see and steal, like you said, kind of ideas from each other. And I think that's one of the
Mhm.
positives of like the Facebook groups and things like that, where people are constantly sharing some good and bad ideas that work in their place, or they tried it and it didn't work, or something to that effect.
I think the follow-up question to that is, if that's not the way in which students, learn and have that same kind of experience, what is?
Right.
If the times are going to change and the students are going to change as a result of that, the way to reach them is also just changed.
Right.
So it's kind of our job to find out, how do we approach them, and how do we get them hooked and learning and having similar experiences in a different way.
Yeah, I think, and this is my own personal opinion. I think when, in the 90s and probably even before that, but I wasn't doing theater, we uh were kind of, there were kids that fell in love with theater, and then there were kids that already knew they loved theater. I think we're going away from the former now. I think you're starting to see that you have great kids in your classes that walk in day one, they know they are a theater kid, and you can point them out, probably. But we're losing the bug. We're losing
Mhm.
the ability to get a kid to love theater. Now I know you have kids that do end up falling in love with it. I can name a couple of my students that didn't like it to begin with and fell in love with it, but I think it's becoming less and less. The percentage is becoming
Right.
less, with the kids that buy in eventually. And I've always kind of wondered why. What is it that that is making them lose kind of the interest or the buy-in?
Yeah.
So
No, you're totally right. And on one hand, my instinct is to say, well, you got to do cooler shows. You got to do shows that are really going to reach an audience.
yeah,
Like, if you're if you're trying to if you're trying to recruit more people, and not just about increasing your numbers, but really allow people to appreciate and understand theater in their world, in their life, from their perspective. Maybe we have to consider not doing the 1950s musicals.
right.
Maybe we've got to take a different approach. um, but at the same time, I'm immediately reminded that the 1950s musicals were not necessarily super hip and cool. They were always what they were. And people were falling in love with Guys and Dolls at one point. Why can't we fall in love with it now? Right? Theater, the plays and the scripts haven't changed.
Right.
So if people are falling in love with it then and that's not the variable that's causing this. I think it's an external environmental issue.
Yeah, yeah, and the other thing about that I think that goes along with that point is, the shows back then, the 40s, 50s, the golden era, if you will, that those songs were played on the radio. Those were like, those were
Sure.
pop songs really. And I think except for, you could argue Hamilton a little bit, and I know people have their opinions, polarized opinions on Hamilton, but I think Hamilton, the one thing that it has done is it kind of, not that a top 40 station is necessarily playing their content, but it has created more of that top 40 pop vibe that other shows haven't. You could say Wicked did that as well to an extent. And then now these movies are doing it, which they always have, but even more so with like Frozen and songs that come from those shows. But we'll see where that goes. It's an interesting point
Yeah.
about if it was popular
Yeah.
then, why can't it be
And I mean,
popular
the
now?
other thing is like, even if the radio decided to suddenly play all these wonderful new contemporary Broadway songs, no one listens to the radio. What is the top 40? If it's not on Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus, it who are you
I,
really playing it
I
for?
take great offense to that. I listen to my morning show every morning, so but they don't play music,
Well,
so
you've
I
already
guess
caught the bug.
yeah, yeah, that's true. And again, they play like it's a grunge song every morning. It's one song. It's either Nirvana or Foo Fighters. So it's like, definitely there are people our age that are listening, but nobody else. So I totally get
Right.
that.
Yeah. No. Students this age are gonna assume that AM FM is a different acronym for
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. That's very funny. So I want to get into the underground side of things that you were talking about earlier, kind of doing that stuff at
Cool.
Ithaca, because I did a very similar thing at UH, and back when I went to UH, there was a master's program, but it really wasn't doing much. Now it's flipped. It's the master's program is driving the program, and the bachelor's is not as much. But when I was there for my bachelor's, we did the same thing. We kind of had an underground experience, if you will, that we would, like you said, we would steal things, and by steal we mean our buddy would know that we're taking their couch, but maybe not realize why we're taking their couch or something, that like that.
Hmm.
But there was that kind of, if we're not going to be able to do it on the big proscenium stage, let's go find some place to do it. So, how do you think that experience for you kind of prepared you for public education, for life in public education?
There is nothing else that prepared me more than that experience. And I think that the epitome of it was seen in my senior directing project. So I had this final show that I was going to do, and it was allowed to take place in this tiny studio. I mean, we're talking like no more than like 20 by 20 little small room with a tiny grid. You could fit in 50 to 70 people at the most. Uh, and and I wanted to do a big show, and there were enough. I think there was enough support to do a big cast show. So the project just started growing and growing, and it even got to a point where um, I had people on board who wanted to work with us to create a budget, and so we did a Kickstarter campaign back when Kickstarter was the only one, and we raised $5,000 or $6,000 to provide X, Y, and Z for the production, and eventually it got to a point where I went to the head of the department and I said, "Why can't I do this on the main stage? If there's nothing else happening this weekend, which I don't think there is, why can't I load in, perform that day, load out, no problem?" And and he said, "You can use the stage, but you can't use anything else. You can't." So what that really amounted to was you can't touch our light board and you can't turn on the stage lights because it's probably being set up for a different show, or we just don't have the training or whatnot. And at the time, that was furious. I was so upset and angry. But what we did was we factored that into our budget, and we found a place that rented lights. And I was working with a lighting designer who understood DMX to USB converters and running lights from a laptop, which now is very accessible. 10 years ago, I didn't even know was possible. And we rented stage lights for a weekend, and we drove an hour away to go load stage lights into two different cars, and we set them up in the morning of a show, and it was all pre-programmed. And I watched this guy run lights that he set up the day of from a laptop. What better way to prepare someone to be a theater educator than to make them do that?
Yeah.
As opposed to it's right there, go turn it on.
Yeah.
And you watch someone turn it on, right? um, it was, and the lighting wasn't great, as you can imagine. Like there was not that many lights to begin with. So, dark shadows here and there. It's a lot of like front light and not a lot of top light.
Right.
Couldn't get into the catwalk, so we're hanging on these booms and this and that. And it wasn't great, but it wasn't about the product.
Right.
It was about the process. And the process resulted in me having a lot more confidence in being able to do projects like that in the future.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And I totally, I think most people can empathize with that went through that. What is the proudest and maybe even the lowest moment you had in that kind of education? Not at Ithaca. I just mean in that world of in experimental theater or found space theater. What is kind of the highest moment that you had, and then kind of the moment where you're like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of this warehouse that used to dump out oil drums or something, like what's one of each?
Well, I think one of my highest moments, my proudest moments came from my very first year of teaching. And in that year, I had already decided on a one act play that was intentionally a very small cast, smallest one I've done to date. I think there was 5 actors in it. But the students kept showing up, and there were a lot of upperclassmen who felt like, oh, this program wasn't here when I was, or when I was younger, and I've got to do something now. And so I had this senior leader who wanted to direct a show. And I decided that instead of him kind of doing crew the entire time of the one act process, that I would kind of hand him the reins to do a senior directing project. And he put together Almost Maine with entirely separate actors for every scene. So almost a cast of 20 something, right? And we put it inside a super small, what we still call a black box. It's not a black box theater. There's no grid. There's no lighting, but it's a square box room that we painted black just for that show, and it's still black to this day. And we fit in, I think, 40 people at a time. I mean, it's really small. So 40 people got to see it, but they got to see it really up close. And we had some lighting. Um, but the students were phenomenal, and they were listening and respecting their student director. And the proudest moment came from a veteran teacher on campus who came to see the show, and she sent a campus-wide email the day after the show and said, in my 20 something years of being at this campus, this is the best show I have ever seen. And I didn't do anything for it. And I'm sure those students would say that's not true. I had a hand in the lighting, I had a hand in this and that, and I was helping them.
Right.
But at the same time, there is no way that it would have happened without their leadership, without their passion. And so really, I mean, the fact that you could just kind of snap your fingers
Yeah.
and give permission for people to be successful. um, Hard work is something to be proud of, but I think there's also a lot to be said for the really easy decisions we make that have giant impacts on other people,
Right.
and we are so close to like not making those decisions or holding people back. And so making that decision to have a senior directing project and letting them run with it, I was so proud of that. My lowest point, ooh, uh, I have a feeling that a lot of people's low points are going to revolve around the one act play
Right.
contest,
Sure.
which
Sure.
I have a lot of qualms with. Um, as much as I value what the one act play contest does for students, what it did for me as a
Yeah.
student, I think that if I could snap my fingers and do away with it today, I
Oh yeah.
would,
Yeah.
because of the competitive nature.
Yeah. I'm with you.
So we got to area in a really hard area where the advancers ended up going to state. We got to area one year with water by the spoonful, and it was my it was the senior year for my first group of students. So fourth year, and it was kind of their culmination, and I poured my heart and my soul into this production, and we had an issue with the casting,
Yeah.
and a student who was playing a specific role had to leave, and so an understudy filled in. But the caveat with that understudy was that if we got to area, they wouldn't be there. She had a prior engagement, and I made the decision to go ahead with it because you you only get one performance for sure,
Right.
right? So why make a decision on area? You got one performance at a time.
Right.
We put her in. She did really well. She got best actress in a supporting role. And then area came around, and the tough decision on who goes into that role, and there was an understudy who was a freshman. There was a crew member who was a senior who did not get cast. And that person had been with me all 4 years and had not gotten the roles that she had been wanting and trying
Yeah.
for and deserved by every definition. So I put the senior in, and she did fine. But that defaulted that freshman understudy to suddenly learning how to do and run the projections during a show. Needless to say, everything seemed to fall apart during the performance. We still ended up with alternate. I'm very proud of the production, but I feel like that was a really low point
Yeah.
for me, and for some of those students, because it wasn't what we could have done.
Right.
And I don't blame any one of them. I think that ultimately, um, maybe it's my fault, maybe it's no one's fault, maybe that's just the nature of this. There are going to be bad performances, and that was one of them. Maybe it would have happened with the perfect cast anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the whole second guessing yourself of, did I put the kids in the right spots to succeed and do their best and be their best. Um, that's always tough for
Yep.
teachers. It's especially, I think personally, maybe I'm biased because I'm a technical theater director. Um, I think it's more detrimental when you're putting a technical student or a technician in a spot that is foreign to them. There's so
Right.
much pressure. There's just there's something to be said about an actor that's not secure, that goes out on stage. Eventually, that first clap or that first laugh or something is going to break the kind of insecurity for them at some point in the show, and that doesn't happen for technicians, I don't think. I know personally, I'll sit there for, when I was a touring artist and a lighting designer on the road, for 2 hours I was tense, thinking the entire time, I've got to get everything right for 2 hours. And because I know nobody's clapping for me. and they're like, oh man, the song ends and the blackout was perfect, and nobody's like, oh my gosh, that blackout, and they just break out into applause. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things. I just feel like technicians sometimes are during the duration of a performance or production, they're tense. Anxiety is just going the entire time, and it's not always the case for an actor because they do have those moments of, oh, the audience is listening. They confirm that they're hearing the words that somebody's saying because they laugh or cry or clap or sigh, whatever. I know I just rhymed a little bit, so
Hmm.
I just had my Seuss moment. I got to know, as far as your, like you were talking about that moment you were getting ready to sign to go into the military. Is there a part of you still that
Right.
is sort of militaristic is a negative word. I'm not smart enough to figure out what the word I'm looking for is, but is there a part of you that still has that kind of regimented schedule type of the that military type feel? I mean, I'm looking at you now, you have a shaved head, so do I, but there's nothing military about me, so I'm going to assume the same with you. But is there still that kind of craving
Right.
to get that, and do you get that from your kids, from being like a director that's able to kind of lead something that's structured and has, make sure you do this, that kind of stuff?
Right. That's a great question. I've never been terribly great at structure, and so I don't think that that's the element in which I would have necessarily fit in a military life. But what comes to mind is something that I've actually been experiencing and reflecting on lately, which is the need to work with my hands. I love the quote unquote the hard day's work. I and I've seen this. One of the ways in which this is clear is my switching from theater arts teacher to technical teacher. Um, I've done both, and there was a moment in time where I was so excited and enjoying construction and lighting and this and that because of the physical nature of it. And so when we hired a assistant theater arts director, we ended up going with the acting coach director who was really great and experienced, and that kind of defaulted me into the tech position because I felt like I had enough knowledge to do that now, and I did, and it was fun. I'm now back teaching the acting classes and being the primary director, but I really, really, really love working with my hands. And that's something that I think, I mean, anyone who does knows that this year, this pandemic, has kind of deprived us of that. I just recently bought my first house, and I wanted it at the beginning of the pandemic because I was like, I could be doing all this stuff. I could be building things right now instead of sitting in this apartment where it doesn't make any sense to even change a light bulb sometimes. Like, that's a landlord, like, do this and do that. Like, I'm not going to touch those things. So I just bought my first house, and I'm out there doing yard work, and I'm mowing the grass. I'm raking this dead grass. I'm trying to kill all these weeds, and like I think I could get someone to do it for X amount of dollars, but I love being out there. I love sweating, and I love the feeling of sitting down, drinking a cold glass of water, and looking at what I've done. And it's something that I've been missing throughout this year and this challenging time. And so I think that's an aspect of me that could have thrived in a different kind of world. Um,
Sure.
I I've often thought about trying to jump into like a construction site during a summer, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could hack it.
Yeah, and it's also hot. Yeah, I mean it's
Right.
the heat is just, unless you're used to it, I mean, it's just tough. It's brutal,
Right.
especially where you are too. So I see,
Hmm.
through the green screen effect of Zoom, and I mentioned it earlier, but I see your space behind you, from the booth, if you will. And you said it's renovated, right? Is this the renovated space?
Right.
Okay, so what is something that is now in your space that you've wanted for so long that is finally in the renovation that you're like, that maybe you immediately went to play with, or you were like, the kids come look at this. It's like, it's so cool that we finally have this. What is something or some things?
Yeah, there's a couple. The first thing that was really exciting happened before the actual renovation. Our theater it's more of like a music hall, really, really long sections of chairs. It's originally 1,200 seats, very, very big space, and really, really long sections of chairs. And so to get from house left to house right, you have to walk through an aisle. There was no middle section like you normally see to walk kind of horizontally throughout the space. And so one of my original proposals from the very beginning was, let's take out 2 rows there in the middle. We've got plenty of seats. We don't need them all. Let's take out 2 rows so we can walk. I can set up a table, work from the middle of the house, and I can take those seats and put them in the theater classroom. And I found these boxes of carpet tile left over from the last time they put carpet down in the auditorium. I've already counted them. There's enough to cover the square footage of the missing seats that we're going to take out. It's not going to cost anything. And so they eventually gave us the go ahead to do that. And we did that. And that was just a tiny thing of like, it's not about putting my fingerprints on that. It's about kind of inspiring and letting the decision makers understand and trust that us theater teachers know what we're talking about, that we're not just an average teacher that came, well, yeah, we studied art and theater and acting and dancing and this and that, and now we're coming in and we want to talk about acting. Like, well, there's a lot of practicality and really logistical knowledge that many theater educators have, and oftentimes there's nobody better to go to in the district than those people in terms of making decisions about
Yeah.
facilities.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that was really exciting. A couple of other things. I mean, our big auditorium, one of our school colors is gold. We're purple and gold, which kind of turns into purple and yellow. And the walls were literally this they say like Easter yellow, like kind of pastel-y. To me, it was urine. It was urine yellow, and it was disgusting and very dated, and the chairs were falling apart. And so part of the renovation, like the real answer should be the LED
Sure.
lighting, the cyc that we didn't have, being able to have cyc lights and change them to every color. And,
Yeah.
I think a lot of theater educators have gone through that transition in the past year to 10 years.
Yeah.
And they know that moment that you turn on the cyc lights for the first time, and you all say, pick a color, any color. I can do whatever color you want. And that's super cool. But I also expected that.
Right.
Like, I was already ready for that. And our students were too. They've seen it in other schools and they're like, when's ours coming? So that didn't really surprise anyone. What really surprised people was sitting down in these new seats and looking around and just saying, this looks good.
Yeah.
Because it just never occurred to us that this really kind of forgotten space, very utilized. It's a 50, no, it's a, yeah, 50 something year old building. And it was just long overdue for a makeover. And we were excited for new curtains. We had some torn ones. We were excited for lights. We didn't realize how good it would just look to sit down and look around.
Right.
And that was really, really cool.
That's neat. That's a good answer. I like that. So I'm going to wrap up with something fun. I think we've been way too
Cool.
theatrical, and nobody wants to hear that. So uh, I got to know what, and it could be new. I don't want to guide you this direction, but you mentioned just buying a new house, and we are on our second house, and that's only because my wife likes to. She's got to have new projects, but the I don't want to steer you towards HGTV, but I got to know, what is a guilty pleasure of yours that you that some people might know about you, but mine is, yeah, I will sit with my wife and watch HGTV, and I won't hate it. It's not something I crave, but I will do it, and I actually get ideas from it. That's a guilty pleasure of mine. But what is something you might have that you don't mind getting out there?
Well, HGTV is definitely up there. More specifically, Fixer Upper.
Yes.
I had no idea who Chip and Joanna Gaines were
Yeah.
until the beginning of this pandemic,
Yeah.
and within a matter of a month, we had watched every single episode. And so there's definitely a lot of that, but I'm not so much ashamed about that because I feel like so many people
Yeah.
are probably thinking like, yeah, duh, like
Yeah.
what, you just found out about them, or maybe they did and they felt the same way. Like, I thought it was just really really cool to watch that, and especially like how they're Texans
Yeah.
and whatnot. But I think another kind of guilty pleasure is watching what the kids watch. I want to um, not only stay up to date with and be in the loop
Yeah.
and understand. There's a lot of legitimacy toward uh, trying to be in their circle and speak their language, so
Yeah.
to say. But at the same time, it's like it's not just about that. Sometimes it's like we all need recommendations on what to watch on Netflix, and
Yeah.
and and sometimes I feel like if it's cool enough for a 16-year-old, it's probably pretty cool.
Yeah.
Many times it's very disappointingly wrong,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's cool. And I watched this show on Netflix called On My Block, and it's fun. It's at the end of the day, there's nothing super exciting about it, but I'd be lying if I said, "Oh, I only watch it because my kids watch
Right.
it." Like, no, I watch it because I like it.
So we'll end this podcast with recommending On the Block on Netflix. There you go.
Minor wisdom.
Now, introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
1, 2, a skittle do.
Minor wisdom.
I hope everybody had a happy 4th of July as I sit here and record. There are still people 2 days later setting off fireworks, and I hate those people. I don't care who they are. Yeah, I hate them. Anyway, I've got Jason Barrera on. A lot of you know Jason Barrera. He's not one to approach you or make his presence known very much, but he's like one of the most helpful and kindest people you'll see at Thespians. He's always wearing a hat, seems to almost always wear a hat, which don't hate the player, hate the game, you know what I'm saying, or hate the game. Anyway, I too, if I could wear a hat every day, I would wear a hat every day, but he was one of those people I just needed to get on, and I don't regret it. I recorded this quite some time ago. He's a super nice guy. There were a couple of interruptions, I'll tell you that. Hopefully my editing skills are pretty good. But there were a couple of interruptions because the dude was taking care of his daughter. His wife was out, and he was like kind enough to say, "Yeah, man, I'll do the interview," and didn't tell me, but his daughter wasn't feeling well, and the guy still came on. You won't be able to tell, but I just needed to tell you that because there are going to be quite a few cuts where he needed to go tend to his daughter, rightfully so, as you should. And so, yeah, just throwing that out there as an excuse. So, but Jason was great. You'll hear the interview in just a minute. Hope everybody had a good July 4th. Really weird week. Weird week. Politically speaking, weird week. Just lots of crazy stuff. My family, because through marriage, grew a lot, and years ago, 27 years ago, started something called Schneider Fest because we married my aunt married into the Schneiders more than 27 years ago, but still 27 years ago we started this thing. Originally it wasn't on July 4th. I think it was Labor Day or something like that. But this year it was July 4th weekend. It was this past weekend. I had a good time. Smaller group than usual. But the reason I say all that is because, and I don't talk about a lot of these things on the pod, and nor do I feel like they need to be talked about because you're here to hear the guest, and I'll be brief. But ever since I had kids, anxiety crept in. And I say this, I just saw Inside Out 2. Very poignant. That movie, not the best movie in the world, but there are moments of it that you're like, that really hits close to home. But I was not a kid that had at least diagnosed anxiety when I was being the redundant departmency of redundancy department. But I was not a kid that had diagnosed anxiety, and I'm pretty certain I had it because like every day I was real nervous to go to school because I thought I was going to be late. I've always had time issues. If I'm not on time, I'm pissed. I'm very angry. I don't like to not be on time somewhere, especially if somebody's relying on me to be on time. I hate it. So, and then when I'm there early and most people are not on time, I just sit there and hang out. But anyway, when I was a kid, that was still the case, and I would have to get my mind off of people being late, and to the point where I had to play games or I had to do something. And at that time, no cell phones and stuff. I tried to find the most creative ways to entertain myself. I say all that fast forward to now as an adult. My anxiety is borderline crippling because of my children. It's not their fault. They don't do anything to cause it necessarily, but because I have children, it is really sort of manifested itself into something a little more serious as an adult. And so this past week I had some issues, and it made for this Schneiderfest experience to not be as positive or as fun as it typically is for me and my family, because I wasn't able to get ahead of things. And I say that not to I am never one to need or want a pity party ever. I actually hate that. I hate when people do it for others, pity parties and things like that. Be there for people, but pity parties are just super annoying. I don't need it. What I want to do is I'd love to talk to people about it. Like, I'm fairly certain that maybe, I say it was my kids, but it could have been from my parents' death or anything like that. And I've gone to therapy and all that kind of stuff. But if anybody out there is kind of struggling with sort of adult anxiety, it's kind of new to them, right? They haven't had to deal with it very often. No offense to the people that have had it forever, or apparently, supposedly have had it forever. I don't really, I'm not going to relate to that. But the people that kind of started experiencing it as an adult, or maybe once you started a family or anything like that, I'd love to talk to you, because it's it's not unique. It's not that I'm different than others. I think that other people have had this same issue, but reach out. I'd love to talk to you about it, because Lord knows I do struggle from it. So would love to find out ways you help yourself. Enough of that. Again, I've got Jason Barrera on. This week I'm going out we have our Texas Thespians retreat, and then I am working Towels Camp starting Wednesday. The Towels Camp starts tomorrow, but I'll be there starting Wednesday and through the following Saturday. So for, 10 days. So it'll be fun. It'll be an experience, but I will have an episode next week. It's the last episode that I've recorded for a while, but I'll try to get back on the saddle and record some more. My wife is going to be out of town the week after I get back from Towels, so I'll have daytime availability sometimes to record. We'll see. But anyway, enjoy this interview with Jason Barrera. Buy a shirt, get some merch, do all that kind of stuff, help support the pod, join the Patreon, do all the good things. And Bobby, I'm really sorry about John Cena.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. Just for those people who don't know me, my name is Jason Joe Anko Barrera. I am a 41-year-old theater teacher that has been teaching theater for about 13 years now. I've taught at the university level, the college level. I've taught at the high school level, the middle school level, and at the elementary school level. So I've done it all. I've been there from the very beginning. I love theater. It's something that I want to do for the rest of my life, not only direct it, but create it, write it, and live it. So I've been, my story goes back a while back. I was very shy, recluse kind of person in high school. I never wanted to do acting or performance. I was always sticking to myself with my friends, just watching movies, playing video games. That's what we would do. Then all of a sudden, my senior year comes around, and there's this thing in my high school in Laredo, Texas, called the Princess Pocahontas Pageant, where high school students represent different chiefs and uh, matriarchs of these Indian reservations, and we put on gowns and we perform and dance on stage. And my mom told me that this was a great opportunity for me and that I should dress up and perform on stage because there's a scholarship at the end of it. And if I wanted to go to college, I need to get this scholarship. I hated the idea. I did not want to do it. I was just very I was very shy about the whole situation, and well, as the time progressed and as things went on throughout my senior year, I met a lot of new friends there, and lo and behold, the day of performance comes up. The rehearsals were grueling. I had this big monologue to memorize. I've never done anything like that before. And the day of performance came, and I remember being backstage and seeing the work and the magic that was happening backstage, the communication, the people on the headsets, like, all right, fly one, go, fly two, go. All right, let's get on standby. All right, actors on standby, stage left, ready, go. And I was just like, what is this world that I'm in? Right? I was like, I loved every bit of it. So I was just more curious and more wanting to know what this world was after this performance in my senior year in high school. And my mom spent over like $10,000 on my costume and my rehearsals and my horse practice because I have to ride a horse. And then lo and behold, the scholarship was only $300. So so it was a little like, what? But it was okay. I loved I think it was more for the experience. Um, and then my senior year, I also had a teacher named Dr. Gilberto Martinez, and he was my speech teacher. Excuse me. And he loved the way I spoke. And he says, "You have excellent pronunciation. I love the way you talk. You're very vibrant. Your voice is very it draws me in." He's like, "Have you ever thought of doing this like more, like acting and being on stage?" And I was just like, no, I just really wanted to go into sports medicine. That was my thing. I loved watching people get popped and chiropractics and massage, and I loved doing that to my family when I was young. I'll massage them, and so that's what I wanted to go into. So when I went into college at Laredo Community College, he was also a professor there. He got me into his theater class, and his theater class was very intimate. It was about 8 students, and but part of his contract is he has to do a play at the end of the semester. And I was like, Gil, I've never acted before. I've never become a character. Like I'm very nervous. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to even approach this. Like I've never taken acting classes. He's like, well, here's the thing. The play that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write it for you guys. And we're gonna start off with the characters that represent who you are. So he kind of matched the characters of our personalities in class. 8 characters, 8 personalities that already belonged to us. So it wasn't a hard kind of transition. Uh, but when he wrote the play, he wrote it in a way where we all felt comfortable being us. But we had to memorize lines and monologues, of course. And I was the quiet guy, the shy guy. and that was what the character called for, and I was able to portray it. So my story continued there, and when I was when we did that play, everyone that went to go see it were like, "Hey, that was a great job! Like, is this your first time acting?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's my first time." They're like, "You did wonderful, good job." And for some reason, I just loved it, and I loved the experience. So when I got accepted to Texas State for physical therapy, that's when I was going to go into Texas State. I got accepted. And I was going to go do my graduate. Sorry, I was going to go do my major as physical therapy and sports medicine. And my minor, I chose theater. It's because you needed to have a minor. Well, as I was in college at Texas State, doing my bachelor's in physical therapy or sports medicine, or uh, my for some reason the classes that I was taking just didn't like grab onto me. They didn't hold me. They didn't grab my attention. But I only had like one class every semester of theater, and I gave it my all. Like I was there. I gave it all my attention. My grades were A's there and C's and D's in my other classes. And I had to make a decision. Like I couldn't go on doing something that wasn't making me happy. So at the end of that year, my second year, I chose to switch my major, and I switched it to theater as my major, and I never stopped after that. I just kept going and going and going. Um, I loved everything about it. I wanted to continue my education more, so I went to the University of Texas Pan American. I got my master's in theater there. I have my bachelor's in Texas State, my master's in uh, University of Texas Pan American, UTPA. And that's where my journey as a playwright kind of took off. And I love writing plays. Like I love to educate people and I love to talk about my culture, the Latino culture. There's a lot of Latino stories here in South Texas that a lot of people don't know about. And the stage is the perfect medium for people to know these stories. So I write about, had a play that went into this competition, the Latino Theater Initiative competition, and it was about a boy who has three imaginary friends, and these three imaginary friends are the Latino kind of like myths and monsters, the Chupacabra, La Llorona, and El Cucuy, right? So I took this play on just, I wrote it just to have fun with it, just to educate people about, this kid was taught that these monsters were there for a reason in his life. So he uses them as an excuse to get out of trouble, and he uses them as an excuse to like uh, delve into his own like personal struggles. But the mom never wanted him to use these as an excuse to get out of life situations, but just to teach him how to be a better person. And then unfortunately, he conjured them, and they became real to him. So it really goes through this journey for this kid. But those are the stories that I started writing in theater. Uh, and when I've acted in over 40 or 50 plays. I don't even know. I've written and directed about 10 or 15. And now with, high school theater, I just love UIL one act play. I love the competition. I love competing. I love when my kids graduate and they tell me that they want to be theater majors, right? That's like the biggest accomplishment for me. And I'm very happy for them when they do that. Um, so my life has been surrounded by theater. I do everything that I can to be the best theater teacher I can be. I try to make things fun for a world that's uh, pretty much, if you turn on the TV, everything is about, death and destruction. These kids are just like that's their every day, and I want to be like a getaway for the reality of life. And that's how I treat my class. That's how I treat my teachings because it taught me how to get away and how to have fun. So I want to use that foundation for them as well to become a teacher that has allows them to get away and have fun as well. But theater is not my only medium. I have a film. I have my own film production company I do short films, and I also tell stories of Latino stories, Texas stories, and I will always continue to write things that I know well. But at the moment right now, I'm still, you know, uh, trying my best to write as much as possible, create as much as possible, and continue doing this as much as I possibly can, for however long I can. But right now, that's my story. There's so much into I can go into details, but within
Well,
an hour, I can fill up the whole hour with my story. But that's kind of like the abridged version of my life
so
at the moment.
yeah, so I wrote down a couple things, and my kids are in the background too. So we got kid problems, but
Yes.
what is it about the passion that you have to tell the stories that you want to tell? Was there something that kind of made you think, these stories need to be out there, or was it just a lack of storytelling from that perspective that kind of draws you to writing these stories?
So ever since I was doing my bachelor's, the plays that we would do deep dives and studies into were plays by like George Bernard Shaw, Tennessee Williams, Stanislavski, like all these plays were like the greater picture of life, right? But they never told my stories, which I was never. So all these stories were great, and they were a good foundation for me. I love playwrights. I love everything that, I love Shakespeare. I love all the classics, right? Um, but they never told my stories, right? And then I read there was a play um, called Zoot Suit, right? I don't know if you ever heard of it. Um, and it was about, you know, Mexicans struggling in California, the riots that were happening, and then like the injustice that was put upon them, just for being there, for being Mexicans and representing their culture and their pride. So I really started falling in love with like Latino theater, the Chicano movement from California into Texas, and all those playwrights. And I wanted to be, I wanted to write those stories. And I felt that there wasn't enough representation. There's a lot more now, but when I was in undergrad, like in 2002, 2003, 2004, there was not enough Latino stories being told. I wanted to see more. I wanted to do more. So every time I talked about this, especially like when I defended my thesis, I told them like, I am going to be a Latino playwright first, and then a playwright second, and then a standard playwright second. And they're like, why? I go, because you don't know me. You know me as a student, but you don't know me. And they're like, oh, well, then get us to know you. So that's when I started telling them about my journey and how I want to pursue my life as a Latino playwright, and just like really have our culture speak for itself. Um, so yeah, it's been extremely important to me, and I just wish there was more stories being told about South Texas, about the border crisis. We told some really impactful stories during my graduate year. We did a play called Crawling with Monsters, and that's what the kids would say when all the cartels were trying to take over the border of Mexico and Reynosa and Nuevo Laredo. And there was what were they called, balaceras, right? Like these shootings. And the teachers, in order to try to calm down the situation, so um, ahí están los monstruos todos abajo del escritorio. Like there's monsters are outside, everybody under the desks, right? They would make it a game. So, and it really impacted us because we interviewed so many people from Mexico that were going through this. And um, Eventually CNN covered it, but not enough people know the stories of the people that suffered during that time period of 2008 to 2014, which was like the worst spread of gang violence in the border of Mexico. Um, so we even had like the threats because the cartels were knowing that we were doing a play about them, right? And about the violence, and we had to like hire like 20 police officers to stand outside the theater just so we won't get shot while we're doing the play on the border. So no one knows about that, and we made the newspapers. CNN covered us at one point. People didn't know what was happening in the border. They're like, is that much of gang violence going on there? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And the ones that are suffering the most are the kids. The kids have to hear these gunshots every single day. I was like, why can't we tell these stories? This is important. And I've always taught my kids that theater is not just to entertain, but to educate. And this is a perfect opportunity to educate the masses, right? Yeah, film, I always tell them, film reaches a larger audience, a larger platform, but theater can really impact what's close to you, right? The city that you're in, at least educate them. That way they can talk about it and it spreads. Okay? And but yeah, I really want to talk more about and write more about our stories and the culture of Mexicans and Latinos because I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm moved just hearing all that because, I mean, it's you are correct that theater's just more. It can be more personal. Not that you can't get something
Hmm.
personal out of a film, but it's definitely that. Um, I have a friend named Bernardo Cabrera who I went to school with, University of Houston, who I interviewed on here, just as a
Hmm.
playwright as well, and he's similar type of motivation, I guess, is to tell the stories that aren't being told, haven't been told, and also that positive spin. Not a spin. Spin's a negative way to say it, but a way to show off positivity rather than all the negativity, which you spoke on about 10 minutes ago about stories of violence and all this kind of stuff. Uh, just don't portraying the certain stereotypes, I guess, if you will, that paint people and not just Latinos, but the black community, just even as a Jew, like Jewish community, things like that. So yeah, um, that's good stuff. But where do you find time like to do this stuff? I mean, you have a 4 year old. You
Hmm.
work a full time teaching job, and we all know how hard that is. Where do you find time to do it, or is time not a factor because it's your passion?
Like right now, it's been a really hard time just to like write more uh, because school does take up a lot of my time. And over the summer, I'm teaching summer camps, right? Theater camps for little kids. And I wish I could just sit down more. But when I do sit down, and I'm able to sit down and write something. Uh, I push because I enter my plays into I don't know like these festivals. I love going into Film Freeway and looking for festivals to submit plays or screenwriting. I've been writing a lot more screenplays more than plays because I really want to dive into the world of film some more. I just had my one of my westerns go through its run, and we won all these awards, and we have all these accolades that we've achieved with that western film. And I really wish people knew more about the history of what I'm trying to tell in these films and writing these scripts and screenplays. I find the time whenever, I'll be honest, whenever it's like shopping day for mom and Aberdeen and my mother-in-law, and they go out to like Goodwill or Salvation Army, or it's a mall day, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna write. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Um, but I find the time whenever I have a moment to myself. It's rare nowadays, because I have to stay focused, and I create my outline and my diagram and my hero's journey. I go back into my books and my Save the Cat, and just to try to get my bearings once again of what's the story that I'm telling. But it takes a while, and time is extremely important, and I don't have much time. But when I do it, I do as much work as I possibly can.
What kind of drew you? You good?
Yes,
Okay.
okay.
What kind of drew you to screenwriting?
Well, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia for
Yeah.
3 years. I got my MFA in film and television. So I worked on a lot of films there, and we had to write films, write and write and write. And all our professors there are like, they're from Hollywood, and they tell us stories. They're like, they always say this one thing, like, if you want to be a filmmaker, there must be something wrong with you, right? So uh, I was um I was really drawn into writing uh, movies because, once again, all the people that I was with at school, they were writing, your basic story. Even like the Chinese foreign exchange students were trying to write white stories, or we're trying to write like stories that they've seen, like Dirty Harry, and all these other things. And I was just like, have you all ever heard of like the Mexican card game called Loteria? And they're like, what is that? Oh, it's kind of like, it's Loteria translated as lottery. But what I'm trying to do is I'm writing a web series about each character from the Loteria series has its own story, and there's a reason why they're in this card game. So my all the students there were like, well, can you write a few scripts for us, and we'll direct them. So I wrote like 3 or 4 scripts, and I gave them out to the filmmakers, and it was great because the filmmakers made that film in their own vision, which was really cool. Uh, and I was just like, from then on, I was hooked with screenwriting. I was just like, I want all my stories to come to life. I don't care who produces them. If I produce them, I'll produce them. If they produce them, they produce them, and I want to see their vision come. I want to see them translate my story in their vision. um, and it was great. There was we did El Músico, right, the musician. We did La Dama, right, the fancy woman. We did El Indio, El Catrín, El Valiente, right, like all these characters from this card game, and each of them with a backstory. And I wrote this anthology series with each character. And I was just like, I want to do more of this, and I know I can do it. So ever since then, I've been hooked on screenwriting. Like, just to see if people understand what I'm writing on paper, can they bring it to life on in front of the camera, right? It's so different than theater, right? Because in theater, I write theatrical plays, but I'm thinking about 1 or 2 locations, right? What means suits the space, right? That's what we always teach. And I try my best to try to teach that in my classes as well. I was like, film and theater are two different monsters, both beautiful in their own way, but one of them is absolutely limited. Okay, so what can you do within that limit? So that's why I love writing screenplays now. Like it's like it's my thing, and I have like at least 20 that I'm ready to pitch to any director that I see. Because in film school they teach you the elevator pitch. You get stuck in an elevator with a big old producer. You have 60 seconds to pitch them your film. Get ready and go. Right? So uh, that's what's been my go-to right now. Screenplays. I love it.
Right. Yeah, that's cool, man. You have such a passion about things, man. Are you crafty as well? I mean, you're crafty with words, but are you,
Mhm.
like, I see the tree behind you. Is that homemade, or I mean, are there like, do you do that kind of stuff too? The sort of Mel Edwards style, uh, crafty things, and or are you mostly pen to paper? Or, I say that meaning writer, but I'm assuming you're typing as well. So,
I do it all. I've always been in a high school that is at the high school that I was teaching at this past year, Taylor High School. Uh, I'm the only teacher. I do theater one, theater two, theater three. I do tech one and tech two. I do audio video one and audio video two. At my high school, I teach everything, um, and I build my own sets. You know, uh, I uh, I wish I can weld. That's I'm trying to learn how to weld because I love metal framing. Uh, but right now, construction is I was trained with and my stagecraft, and I did construction with my dad for years. He owns a plumbing company, so I've always had that also with me. But every single set that I've done for UIL One Act Play for the last 10 years, I built my own set by myself, right? Um, I've never had a shop. I've never had um, tech kids to help me in the shop. I've never had a theater assistant. I've done everything by myself for the last 10 years. So uh, it's tough and it's very time consuming. My wife, gets upset when I have to come home at 8:30 or 9 p.m. every single day for during one act season. And I missed a lot of time with my family and my daughter, but it's I the way I think about it is that these kids only have 4 years to remember something, and I want them to remember this moment in their lives, and I will work a little harder just so they can get that memory, right? Ever since I saw Inside Out, I always talk about core memories, right? I was like, I want this opportunity, this theater, its time on stage, for it to be one of your core memories forever. And they take to it, and um, but yeah, I do it all, man. I love. I'm very. I don't know if you like different types of styles, but I love steampunk. I love gothic. I love more colonial, Western kind of style. But usually I'll turn my plays into that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I just did vampiric gothic for my last play this for one act. We did a murder mystery, and I turned everybody. It was all black and white, right? So makeup was black and white, all the stage furniture black and white, all the props were black and white. It was really cool. It looked beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do it all. I build it. I can do it.
Yeah, good man. That's good. You're a motivating character, man. I've got two more things and I'm gonna let you go love on your kid.
Okay.
But do you still have an interest in sports medicine related things, or like is there still a little bit of that passion with the masseuse side, the chiropractor side of things? Do you still have that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do. Um, I'm actually gonna go back and try to get my massage therapist license. And couple of more. It's just something I want to do over the summer, right? Charge $75 an hour. It's a good job to have. I did it during college just to, I was a bartender and a massage therapist during college. But I had to get by somehow.
Yeah.
But yes, I still love sports science. I love helping people. Like my wife, I give her massages because her back is always hurting. Even people in the world of theater, right? Like it's grueling and it hurts. During my community theater times, like I'll have like everyone just like, hey guys, relax. If anybody wants their back popped, I'll pop your back, and they're like, oh, me. So um, it's something I do still have an interest in, and it's something that I do still want to pursue. But maybe not go back to school for it, but definitely get certified for it
Right.
again.
Okay, good for you, man. Yeah, good luck finding time with that too. So
Okay.
I'm gonna get you out of here on this last thing. So you mentioned how you were kind of a shy kid and you were a
Mhm.
little hesitant to get into the world of performing arts and all that kind of stuff. Uh, Now you teach, and I'm sure you have dozens, if not a couple hundred, of those kids over your time while you've been teaching that are apprehensive. How do you approach those kids, and how do you get them, like a little bit of word of advice of how you personally get them kind of motivated, or even just to be a part of the ensemble or a part of the process?
That's a good question because that's always like my number one goal, right? At the beginning of class, in my especially my performance classes, I will ask them. I always ask the first thing is raise your hand if you're never going to perform in my class. You're not going to act. You're not going to do diddly squat in the middle of this classroom. Raise your hand right now if you're not going to do it. And 95% of the class raises their hands. They're not going to do it, right? So then that's when I start it, like my brain starts to process. Okay, so let's see what they can give me first, right? Let me get to know them as people, what their interests are, right? Get to know every single student, what they like, what they dislike, what they're comfortable with, and what they're not comfortable with. And it's a process. It takes time, but eventually, through theater games, through just talking with them, a lot of them are like, "We love anime." I was like, "Oh, I love anime too. Let's talk about anime. Who's your favorite character?" And they're like, Netero or Sasuke or something like that. I was just like, "Well, Sasuke, man, that's a good hero's journey, man. Like he started off, in this place of like fear and anger, and then they start telling me the story. Oh yeah, and then Sasuke does this and this and that. So I was like, hey, you're performing, by the way. I just want you to know. So just little things like that, or like the football players, they don't want to perform in class, but I was like, but you perform every single day. I see you guys screaming in the middle of the field. You're like, come on! I was like, is that your persona every single day, or are you performing for the crowd? They're like, we're performing for the crowd, sir. So little things like that, and eventually, towards the end of the year, I have a really good turnaround rate, and I have 90% performing and 5% are out. So it happens. They love it. It goes well, but you just have to make it fun for them. Don't make it grueling. Don't ever force them to do it. Give them options. I was like, if you don't want to perform your monologue in class, record it and send it to me Google Classroom. Okay. I will see it myself. I will give you feedback and notes, and then you send the monologue again through a new performance. So I give them options, right? And I never wanted it because my high school teacher like would force me. They're like, you're gonna do this or else you're gonna fail. I never want to be that person.
Right.
I'll be like, you need to do this, but here are your options, okay? Because I do not want you to fail, and I'm gonna do everything I possibly can to help you pass. So if you approach it that way, uh, for the most part, the kids start respecting you, respecting your methods and what you want from them, and they will give you their all. Just treat them like human beings. Like, don't treat them like a number. Don't treat them like an ID number and a test score. If you just treat them like human beings and get to know them, they will. You'd be surprised how much they'll do for you. So that's my advice to everyone. Just basic human decency goes a long way with these kids. And food, a lot of food.
Minor wisdom.